3 cars. That's all it took for the HOA queen to declare war. But what Karen didn't know, I'd spent 5 years quietly buying every foreclosure in this neighborhood through shell companies. Tonight, at the emergency meeting she called to destroy me, I'd reveal my 67% ownership stake, along with the security footage of her breaking her own rules. This isn't just about parking fees, it's about burying a tyrant. Let me show you how revenge gets HOAs abolished. I stood on my porch, staring at the bright orange violation notice taped to my door. The paper crinkled in my hand, exactly the same color and thickness as the one the HOA had pinned to my father's front door years ago. Back then, Dad was fighting cancer and could barely afford his medications, let alone the HOA fines piling up because he couldn't mow the lawn to their standards. They bled him dry until he lost his house. I promised myself I'd never let an HOA destroy another family, especially not mine. Now it was my turn under the microscope. 3 cars in our own driveway. My work truck for my construction business, my wife's SUV for her hospital shifts, and the used Honda we'd recently bought for our daughter's 16th birthday. All of it was perfectly normal until Karen Mitchell, self-appointed queen of the HOA, decided it was excessive. The new fee, a staggering $500 monthly violation, for daring to use our own driveway the way most Americans do. I peered through my living room window to see Karen making her usual morning rounds with her pink clipboard. She paused at my driveway, took a few photos, then measured the distance between the tires and the edge of the pavement. I clenched my jaw. The memories of Dad's heartbreak were still raw, and now she was doing it all over again, to me. My wife, Sarah, joined me at the window. "Maybe we should just park the Honda in the garage," she whispered. "It's not worth the fight." "No," I said firmly. "We're not going to hide our daughter's car like it's contraband." Karen moved on to our elderly neighbor Mrs. Johnson's place, checking her rose bushes with the same hawk-like focus. Mrs. Johnson had already been fined for having flowers too vibrant for the neighborhood's supposedly neutral palette. Karen's reach knew no limit. Little did Karen know that I'd started building my own arsenal of evidence against her, the insurance file, I like to call it. Nestled inside my binder on page 38 were photos of her ignoring property lines, letting her own grass grow too long, and parking her son's 4 cars all over the street. I'd even documented suspicious invoices for pool renovations that never happened. Every time she harassed another family, I added more pages to that binder. Because if there's one thing Dad taught me, it's that you don't rush revenge. You plan it carefully. That morning, I got a text from my lawyer confirming the latest purchase. We'd just closed on another house in the development, bringing my total ownership to 67%. I'd been buying properties for 5 years through Sunrise Properties, a real estate investment firm I set up with different LLC names. At first, it was purely for profit. This was a growing suburb after all. But once Karen started going after neighbors for trivial things, I realized my strategy could do more than boost my bank account. It could end her tyranny, permanently. At noon, I left a message for Mrs. Johnson, reassuring her that I was working on a plan to protect people like her. She told me through tears how she'd received yet another violation, this time for a non-compliant shade of red on her front door. As if the woman hadn't gone through enough, I jotted down the details, slid them into my binder, and checked the time. Karen had called an emergency meeting at 7 p.m. to discuss problem properties. Obviously, she was aiming that gun right at me. What she didn't know, I was prepared to fire back. Before heading to the meeting, I made sure my own insurance file was organized. Each tab represented a different category of Karen's misconduct, from late-night photos of neighbors' cars to fraudulent HOA spending. The best part was the property deeds, dozens of them. Sunrise Properties had methodically purchased multiple houses whenever owners wanted out, tired of fighting the HOA or dealing with Karen's steep fines. If only Karen had bothered to ask who owned Sunrise, maybe she would have realized who was truly behind it all. I also slipped in a few extra photos of her illegal pool extension, one that conveniently encroached on common land. Page 38, circled in red, Karen's pool violation. If she intended to humiliate me in front of the community tonight, I'd give her a spectacle she wouldn't forget. The community center's meeting room was packed when I arrived. Clearly, the neighborhood had caught wind that something big was about to go down. Karen stood at the front, wearing her usual smug grin and clutching that pink, bedazzled gavel. She tapped the gavel on the podium. "Order, please. We're here to address the ongoing issues caused by Mr. Thompson's excessive vehicles." There was a noticeable stir among the crowd, both confusion and annoyance. My neighbor Sarah Jenkins raised her hand. "Why are we here on a Tuesday night? I have to work early in the morning. Karen smirked. The board felt this couldn't wait. The rules are in place for a reason, and I intend to enforce them. Without waiting for further questions, she launched into a slideshow of professionally taken photos of my driveway. She'd had some photographer snapshots from low angles to make it appear as though my 3 vehicles were taking up half the street. Look at this, Karen crooned, pointing to a photo with a red laser pointer. He's practically turned his property into a used car dealership. A couple of her loyal followers gasped. Others rolled their eyes. I spotted Mr. Chen, a high school science teacher, scribbling notes. He'd been slapped with a violation just last month for parking his car half an inch over the driveway line during a snowstorm. Next to him was Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been fined for hosting her extended family cookout. Karen had claimed the food aromas were a neighborhood disturbance. She'd singled out so many families that the tension in the room felt electric. Karen cleared her throat, clicking to the next slide. We have complaints from anonymous neighbors about Mr. Thompson's vehicles blocking sunlight and causing traffic issues. That was rich. Blocking sunlight? My wife Sarah caught my eye and almost laughed out loud. Even in my father's darkest days, I'd never heard an HOA claim a parked car could blot out the sun. She tried to move on to a vote. We propose a new rule: maximum 2 cars per household, mandatory garage parking only. Anyone exceeding that limit will be fined at the board's discretion. Before she could continue, I raised my hand. Point of order, Madam President. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. Mr. Thompson, you are not recognized. I stood anyway, projecting my voice. Funny. According to Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws, any property owner can raise a point of order about voting procedures. Now that I've raised it, let's address the matter of ownership, specifically how much of this neighborhood is controlled by the board versus private investors. Karen's grip tightened on the podium. This is not the time for— It's exactly the time, I interrupted, holding up a folder of documents for everyone to see. Especially since Sunrise Properties has acquired a significant percentage of the homes here. I began walking to the front, each step echoing in the quiet room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Karen's husband Bob passing out copies of the new bylaw. He froze mid-aisle when he realized something major was about to happen. I reached the podium and laid out a stack of property deeds. For the record, Sunrise Properties is my company. Over the past 5 years, I've purchased multiple homes from families tired of the endless fines and harassment. As of last week, I own 67% of the lots in this development. The audience broke into shocked murmurs. Karen's face went pale. That's not allowed, she sputtered, clearly caught off guard. Actually, I said calmly, it's perfectly legal. I made sure of it when I set up my investment LLCs. And I've got plenty of documentation showing your selective enforcement over the years. Let's not forget my insurance file, full of photos, receipts, and every petty violation you've concocted. Her pink gavel slipped from her hand and clattered onto the table. The momentary silence was broken by Mrs. Johnson's trembling voice. She fined me $200 for not shoveling fast enough when I was in the hospital with pneumonia. A wave of shared grievances rippled through the room. Mr. Chen stood and said, I still have the ticket she gave me for my driveway in winter. Meanwhile, her own yard looks like a jungle. Karen banged the gavel again, struggling to regain control. Order. This meeting is out of control. I hereby adjourn. I held up another document. According to HOA bylaws, you need a majority vote to adjourn, and you don't have the numbers anymore. I panned my gaze across the room. I move that we dissolve this current board and hold new elections. Effective immediately. In that split second, Bob tried to whisper something to Karen, but she brushed him off. Panic etched across her face. Finally, she stormed toward the exit. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, she hissed, jabbing a finger at me. I smiled. That's fine. I have a lawyer too, and a lot of evidence. Oh, and by the way, the local news should be here any minute. I invited them to see how we run our perfect neighborhood. As the new board elections were put to an immediate vote, I couldn't help but think of Dad. I remembered standing beside him when he got his final HOA notice, the one that pushed him into foreclosure, how the stress deteriorated his health even faster. I'd watched him crumble under an unjust system. Now, seeing Karen's tyranny finally collapsing under the weight of her own greed, I felt a sense of closure. My father had always told me, fight smart, not angry. Document everything. Sooner or later, the truth will out. Tonight, the truth shone bright in that community center, exposing Karen's lies for all to see. The days following the meeting were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers. Karen tried to counterattack by filing a lawsuit claiming I'd manipulated the market and violated HOA rules through my silent acquisitions. She even tried to freeze my voting rights. But my lawyer was ready with the mother lode. Video recordings of Karen creeping around my property at 3:000 a.m., measuring grass, snapping photos of license plates, and writing threatening notes to neighbors under the cover of darkness. We presented evidence of her private Facebook group chats, where she bragged about making up violations. One post read, "Let's see how long the Thompsons last with these new fees. Maybe they'll move and sell to someone more suitable." Another singled out Mrs. Rodriguez. "Too many extended family members at her house. Time to crack down." When the judge saw photos of Karen's own pool renovation ignoring setback rules, complete with half-finished construction that spilled onto a shared property line, he nearly dropped his pen. The high-priced attorney Karen had hired from the city tried to spin it, calling it a clerical misunderstanding, but then 3 former board members came forward. They testified she'd bullied them into signing off on her personal projects using HOA funds. One even revealed she threatened to write him up for improper landscaping if he didn't vote her way. By the time our side finished presenting evidence, Karen's lawyer looked like he was ready to run out of the courtroom. The judge ruled not only to dismiss Karen's lawsuit, but also to schedule a complete audit of the HOA's finances. Officially, Karen was removed from her position, with an order to repay every unjust fine she'd levied on residents over the years. The total soared above $100,000, including interest and legal fees. Watching her face when she heard the final figure was priceless. The predator had become the prey. Behind the scenes, I flipped to page 38 of my binder for the coup de grace. Clear aerial shots of her property lines from a drone my buddy flew last summer. It proved she'd extended her fence 3 feet onto common land, while I hadn't even needed it in court yet. The look on Karen's face when she realized I had it was worth every penny I spent on that drone footage. She tried to spread rumors afterward, telling neighbors I was some kind of land baron who would force them out. But people weren't having it anymore. They'd seen too much, heard too many of her private rants. Even some of her loyal followers came to my side, apologizing for ever doubting me. With Karen gone, we held honest and fair elections for a new HOA board. Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, and other longtime residents were voted in, bringing fresh perspectives. We rewrote the bylaws to ensure no single person could wield that much power again. We added term limits and transparency policies, banned late-night inspections, and passed what we jokingly called the Karen Clause. No board member could penalize anyone without peer review and a documented rationale, so there'd be no more arbitrary rulemaking. And just for good measure, I did something symbolic. One Saturday morning, I measured Karen's old property lines with a yardstick in broad daylight. A few curious neighbors gathered around to watch. Every time I moved the stick, they cheered, applauding the end of her era. It was petty, sure, but after years of her weaponizing tape measures at 3 a.m., it felt like poetic justice. The difference was that I wasn't there to issue a fine. I was just making a point. No more intimidation tactics in our neighborhood. During those final days of legal wrangling, Karen tried one last desperate move. She sent anonymous tips to the city, claiming my work truck carried hazardous materials. Code enforcement officers showed up, but they left laughing when they realized my truck was full of standard construction gear. One night, Karen slipped a note under my door, accusing me of running a drug ring out of my house. My doorbell camera caught her in the act at precisely 2:58 a.m. She even had the gall to say I'd face a lien on my property within 72 hours. But Sunrise Properties wasn't built on lies or intimidation. It was built on rock-solid legal ground. Once the city realized her tips were bogus, they dismissed the complaints entirely. The news vans arrived on the day of the final court hearing, drawn by Karen's attempts at a media circus. Instead, I used it as a platform to show everyone the color-coded spreadsheets revealing how she diverted HOA fees for personal gain, like her so-called pool renovation that lined her pockets. The reporters ate it up. Karen stormed out mid-interview, vowing she'd move to a higher-class neighborhood where the rules still matter. 3 weeks later, a moving truck pulled in front of Karen's house. She was leaving. As she packed the last of her belongings, word got around that she was already clashing with her new HOA. Rumor had it they had a strict 1 car per garage rule, and she owned multiple vehicles. Turns out her own brand of tyranny wasn't welcome there either. Meanwhile, our neighborhood blossomed. We used the reclaimed HOA funds to improve the playground, fix the pool Karen had neglected, and help some of our elderly neighbors catch up on overdue repairs. We started a community garden where kids and seniors could work side by side, planting vegetables and flowers, whatever they wanted. No color palette policing them. The best part? Property values jumped almost 15% in the first month after Karen left, proving that treating people fairly actually makes a neighborhood more desirable. One evening, I sat outside, watching my daughter park her Honda next to my work truck and my wife's SUV, all in our driveway without a single complaint. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from a resident in Karen's new neighborhood. They'd seen the news coverage of our legal victory and wanted advice on dealing with their own power-hungry HOA president. I just smiled. Maybe I'd send them a page or two from my insurance file. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just about bringing down a tyrant. It's about rebuilding something better in its place. Making sure nobody else gets squeezed out of their home like Dad was. And if Karen ever tries to resurrect her crusade against normal families in some other unsuspecting suburb, I've got plenty of experience. And plenty of receipts. Showing exactly how to take an HOA despot down. Still, nothing beats the image I have in my mind from that final showdown. Karen's pink gavel clattering to the floor, cameras flashing all around her, and the entire neighborhood finally seeing her for the bully she was. In that moment, she wasn't the almighty president. She was just a scared woman cornered by her own lies. And I'd shown everyone that no matter how powerful an HOA might seem, sometimes all it takes is careful planning, a stack of deeds, and the will to fight back for what's right.